Hi, this is Eric Brudvig from IGN Xbox 360 with an Eternal Sonata video review. Eternal Sonata is a Japanese RPG with a wildly imaginative story that takes place within the fever dreams of Frédéric Chopin on his deathbed. The game's immediately alluring thanks to its great visual style and a beautifully crafted world. The attention to detail here is fantastic, and some of the environments are downright awe-inspiring. The game doesn't just look good either. Since it's based on Frédéric Chopin, the famed pianist, his music is prevalent throughout the game, although it's not dominant. There is an original soundtrack here, and it's pretty darn good. The voice work isn't the best you'll ever hear, although it is slightly above average for Japanese RPGs. And of course, you can switch to the Japanese language track at any time if you find that you really don't want to listen to the English audio. Eternal Sonata is a great RPG for people who are looking for an easy transition from a turn-based role-playing game to a more involved one. The game begins with an almost turn-based combat system and slowly evolves to being downright furious with its action. By the end of the game, you'll be linking together combos into harmony chains, counterattacking, blocking, and tossing out items as fast as you can think. It takes a little while to master, but once you do, you'll find out that the skills that you've learned can make the battles much easier at the end of the game. And this isn't an easy game by any means. While the game is action-based, it does take place in specific arenas that are separate from the overworld, which may seem a bit unnecessary to some, but this battle arena does allow for a few extra little nuances in the combat. The main thing that these arenas add is that they allow for a nice light and dark system to be added to Eternal Sonata. Depending on where you are on the battlefield, you either be in the shade or the light, and this is actually more than just a visual bonus. Standing in the dark will give you different moves that you can perform, and enemies, when they move from light to dark, will actually shift appearances and strength. Although the main draw of Eternal Sonata is the bright and vibrant look to it, it does several things that shouldn't be ignored. First of all, it tackles real-world modern-day issues. Conservationism, war and the struggle for power, and death are all central themes to Eternal Sonata. The game is also a good example of how video games can be used to educate. Without even realizing it as you're playing through Eternal Sonata, you're going to get a lesson in music appreciation and music history. The game even successfully blends real-life events from Chopin into this dream world that the video game makers have crafted. This could actually really be a crazy dream that he had, and they let you know it through little cutscenes that happen throughout the game as they explain Chopin's life and how it relates to the dream you're going through. Now, the game does tackle some real issues. The story will sometimes feel a little too blunt for most players. Sometimes it feels like you're being beaten over the head with moral values, and it kind of feels like the game's preaching to you at points. And while this might be a nice game to give your kid, some adults might end up finding the game a little too blunt. Perhaps the biggest limiting factor in Eternal Sonata is that its biggest strength also creates its greatest weakness. The great attention to detail that the game designers put into the Eternal Sonata actually limits its scope. The game is extremely linear, the enemy variety just isn't there, equipping weapons and armor doesn't change character appearances, and the game just isn't as deep as some might hope for. Towns don't take very long to explore, dungeons are brief, and there's only a couple paths to follow through each dungeon, and there are very few side quests in this game. But perhaps the biggest drawback that some people find is that you can't look around. The game has a fixed camera, and as soon as you pick up the game, you're going to want to look around and just explore this environment, and you can't. The last issue we have with the game, and this one's a bit of a minor one, is that the story spirals out of control at the end. Most Japanese RPGs tend to do this, so it's not that surprising that it happened in this game either, but the story might lose some people at the end, and it does get rather confusing. Eternal Sonata isn't an epic RPG. In fact, you can probably beat the game in about 20 hours if you were to rush right through it, although most people will probably take closer to 30. The colorful, child-friendly nature of the game and a limited scope probably will limit some people, and if you aren't a fan of Japanese RPGs, this might not be the game for you. But if you're a fan of Japanese RPGs, this game will be a joy. Just when the combat seems to feel a little bit stale, it evolves and you get something new. The game moves along at a nice pace so that you never really feel like things are dragging, or that you don't know what you're supposed to do next, or that there's a lot of filler there that's not necessary and it's just existing to really eat up time, as a lot of Japanese RPGs do. It may be a bit limited, but the presentation here is good enough to make up for any of Eternal Sonata's shortcomings, and it really ends up being a nice, fun role-playing experience.